Okay, welcome everyone to the last talk of this event. So my field of research is aerosol physics, and aerosols are liquid and solid particles suspended in air. So aerosols are omnipresent in the atmosphere, and they are transported around the globe by air, the air circulation, and wind. As you can see here, there are different types of aerosols displayed in different colors. So aerosol particles can be roughly categorized into natural aerosols and anthropogenic aerosols. Anthropogenic aerosols are mainly produced by combustion processes, and examples of natural sources are, for example, the ocean, deserts, and also vegetation or biomass burning. So pollen are an example of natural aerosols that are emitted by flowering plants. So single aerosol particles cannot be observed by the mere eye, but collectively they affect our atmosphere in many ways. So here, for example, you can see the blue sky that indicates the presence of very few aerosols. And the hazy layer below indicates the presence of high aerosol concentrations. Also, clouds in our atmosphere would not form without aerosol particles. So aerosol particles trigger the formation of cloud droplets and also the formation of ice crystals. And especially biological particles can trigger the formation of ice crystals very effectively and can lead to the formation of these feathery cirrus clouds you can see in this picture. So aerosols also affect our health. And for example, on this picture on the right, you can see a yellow pollen cloud that forms above an alpine spruce forest. And pollen grains are responsible for allergic reactions in our respiratory system. So pollen grains are produced especially by wind-pollinated plants. And examples of wind-pollinated plants are grasses or early flowering trees such as birch, alder, and also hazel, and as well weeds such as mugwort and ragweed. So pollen are essential for the reproduction of plants, and their purpose is to reach the female part of the flower where fertilization occurs. So wind-pollinated plants actually rely on the wind for pollen dispersal, and that's why they produce pollen in large quantities. So for example, 1 hectare of birch forest is estimated to produce 80 kilograms of pollen each year. And pollen grains from different plants actually can be easily identified by their unique morphology, as you can see in this picture. And this is also how it is done currently in networks. However, and now I come to the central part of my research, pollen grains are also known to emit smaller particles under certain conditions, especially conditions of high relative humidity. And you can see the small particles in the next picture. And these particles are basically starch granules contained in the pollen cell, and they are known to carry allergens and cause very severe allergic reactions like asthma. And in our laboratory studies, we also found that these particles actually also have the potential to form clouds. However, it is not yet clear whether these particles really also distribute in the atmosphere, because there are no adequate measurement methods. So one goal of my research is to actually develop a measurement method to actually trace these particles in the atmosphere. And I'm using a newly instrument that is based on the fluorescence properties of these particles. So you can see here that these particles cannot be recognized just by their mere form. And to better investigate this process also in the laboratory, we actually collected catkins from different birch trees and brought them to an aerosol chamber in the lab where we agitated these catkins by wind and directly measured the emissions of the particles released from these catkins. So we collected catkins from trees that were at different growth stages and also at different locations, because our interest was also to investigate the influence of air pollution. So we carefully chose sampling locations, and we had sampling locations where the birch tree was really closely located to a heavily road that was heavily impacted by traffic, and birch trees in more remote areas. And in fact, we immediately noticed that catkins that were exposed to traffic were even visibly polluted on their outer surfaces. And if we take a closer look to the surface, we can clearly see that pollution gathers on the surface of the catkins. And this you can see here in the next picture. Actually, this on the left side you can see a surface of a hazel catkin, and on the right side this is the surface of the birch catkin. And clearly pollution particles are visible. And now the central question of my research is whether these pollution particles actually mix with biological matter, and if these particles also get redistributed in the atmosphere. And actually results of our experiment showed that this is the case. So here you can see two pictures taken with the electron microscope that show soot particles. So this is soot from fresh combustion that has this typical fractal structures. And if we zoom onto these particles, we even find that these soot particles clearly have mixed with biological matter. So this particle in the middle is actually plant-derived and is attached to this soot particle. And now coming back to the title of my talk, actually we find that flowering plants do not only release pollen grains, but numerous particles much smaller in size. And some of these particles might be of biological origin, and others might origin from the polluted environment the plant is located in. And yeah, so I hope in my talk I could illustrate that aerosol physics is not only about physics, but is a really interdisciplinary field. And for sure my research would greatly benefit from collaborations with scientists from biology, chemistry, medicine, and also metrology. And especially city environments are really complex environments where many subsystems interact with each other, and the emission of pollution together with the emission of biological particles is just one example. So, and the call for greener cities and also the preceding climate change will for sure also change the air we breathe. And with that, I would like to conclude my talk, and thank you for your attention.